Why do pastors burn out? Well, in this segment, Weston Bryant is a pastor and coach who gives ministry leaders the clarity they need to flourish.
Space. When I first connect with a pastor, I love to ask them to tell me about their why. Like, don't give me your mission statement. Tell me your why. Why are you called to be a pastor of this church? And usually they light up. They talk about, I just love to teach. I love caring for people in a way that connects them with Jesus and helps them feel valued, all sorts of reasons, right? But then I followed up with the question, how much time do you spend doing your why? Because most pastors work, anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week. And I was talking with a pastor recently who said, well, maybe 8 hours, 8 hours doing his most important work, the thing he's called to, and what people don't understand is that I can't think of many other jobs where, depending on your church size, if you're a larger church, you are the CEO of a company. In a sense, you have a staff underneath you. You have all of these volunteers in your programs that you're trying to manage and lead. You're expected to give sermons that capture people's imaginations and move them to action. If you ever have an off day, people are going to go find the next church, and people are very, unfortunately, not everyone, but sometimes the squeaky wheel makes the most noise, so you just get a handful of people who feel very strongly about their opinions and they're very critical, and so imagine if every week you're just hearing from people about how your sermons aren't good enough, or they're arguing on a point that you made, or they don't want to follow your advice, or just it wears on you, and so again, that's coaching gives pastors the space to process those things, but then ultimately to say, what is most important? And what do I need to do to say no to some of those fringe things that they're not bad, but they're just not the main thing.
When you help a pastor, do you find them losing their desire to preach or teach about Jesus?
Not necessarily that specifically, but what I often find with the pastors I work with is they're often questioning their calling, or they're looking for a way to multiply their ministry impact, and so a lot of my pastors, they're just burning out, they're overwhelmed. And so they're trying to discern, I still want to minister to people, but is that in the context of the local church? Do I stay in my church? Do I find another? Do I quit and find a job in the world? They're just searching for those answers. I'd say the other half of the pastors I work with, they're maybe in a healthier place. Like, they love people well. They have good family dynamics and relationships and boundaries, but they get distracted, and they end up doing a lot of busy work, if you will. And so our coaching is just very focused on, let's make the main thing and really multiply the impact of your ministry.
1 Thessalonians 5:12 through 13, Paul tells us, "Now we ask you, brothers and sisters, to acknowledge those who work hard among you, who care for you in the Lord, and who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work. Live in peace with each other."
I think the greatest message the church has for the world is forgiveness. We talk about love all the time, but love has come to mean, it's watered down in our culture. I love Giordano's deep dish pizza. My family's from the south side of Chicago, and I love my wife, but those are vastly different meanings, right? And so I think understanding that your pastor is human and offering the grace that Jesus gives us, forgiving pastors when they make mistakes, just not having a critical spirit. I love to talk about the one another's in Scripture. I think that's a great place to start, because if I remember it right, about a third of the one another speak to love, a third of them speak to unity, and 15% speak to humility. And if we just embrace those things with each other, and especially with our pastor, man, our churches would thrive. And I think, to get very concrete, because that's kind of a general answer, I think just understanding what makes your pastor feel loved, whether it's words of encouragement, whether it's acts of service, quality time, and then loving them in that way. And I would say, you can ask your pastor, like, hey, how can I serve you? Your pastor's probably going to buffer that, because they are called to serve. And there's going to be this hesitation, like, I don't want to trouble anyone. It's my job to serve first. I would just press in. No, sincerely, how can I serve you right now? And whatever answer they give, just do your best to do it.
Can you share a story of maybe how you've helped one pastor?
So, there's one guy came to mind right away who he started in student ministry and was really wrestling with what was his purpose, and over time, as we worked together, he just kind of pulled to the surface the theme of teaching. I love kids. Kids are great. I love teaching people in a way that moves them to act. And then in the midst of our coaching, his church was going through some inner turmoil on the staff, some leadership transition. And then he began to wrestle with, like, what is God doing in this? Where is my place? And all that to say, through our coaching, he ended up determining, there's a window of opportunity for me to become the teaching pastor of this church, and I want to go for it. And so he talked with his elders, and I think to his surprise, like, they were ecstatic about him stepping into that role, And so not only did he, kind of move into his call and his passion, if you will, but really he left the student ministry better than he found it, because that was a focus of ours too, was like, whatever road God's going to lead you down, you want your ministry to be in a place where it's going to flourish and thrive, whether you're there to enjoy it or whether you get to pass that along to someone else. And he did.
Yeah. Also makes me think about how people will enter into something and it just is, they're fighting the wind.
Yes.
And maybe God isn't just calling you there. If you're fighting the wind the whole way, maybe you have to pray and say, Lord, direct me to another way you can use me, another call on my life, another purpose. And, you're encouraging, and that I'm sure you're helping somebody right now who really needs to know that, a pastor that really needs to know that they are loved. And there's people out there, like you said, Wes, they need to tell their pastor they're loved. They need to encourage their pastor and tell them, you're doing a great job. We didn't like your sermon. We want to do that. We want to do that.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. And I'll just say to any pastors who are listening out there, I just want to encourage you that God can do abundantly more than all that you would ask or think. It's just a powerful verse of Scripture, and we often struggle to believe it, that our God is bigger, our God is greater, and he absolutely wants to use us, and he wants to use you.
More information about this ministry, go to commissionleadership.com. Watch the latest and greatest interviews on YouTube and listen to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, and so many more.